What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Nintendo Land, and I know this is a weird video for the channel. Nintendo Land covering a Sony game, but this game reminded me so much of 3D Mario games of the past, I just absolutely had to cover something with it, and I thought one big thing to cover would probably be the boss battles, because there's over 20 unique boss battles in this game, so I thought I'd make a list of the top 20 going from the worst to the best in Astro Bot. Now, odds are, a lot of you guys are probably just hardcore Nintendo fans, and probably have never seen or played this game, but I definitely suggest giving it a try, or at least just watching the video and then giving it a try, or determining if you want to, because it is very much 3D Mario heavily inspired, including the boss battles and just the moment-to-moment gameplay. But enough of that, I'm ranking all the bosses. If you guys enjoyed this video today, make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and if you played Astro Bot, let me know what you thought of the list and what are your rankings down below. But without further ado, let's get into the top 20 boss battles in Astro Bot. Coming in at number 10, we have Champ Matro, which is one of the very first bosses you'll fight in this game. This is more of a mini boss where you'll just use the frog punching hands in order to knock down all these Russian doll type robots until you break them apart for the smallest one to be revealed. Honestly, this one isn't much at all. You just kind of stand in the middle of the arena and just slam the L and R triggers. There's not a lot that you have to do in order to take this boss down, and that is definitely why it's probably one of the worst in this game. Number 19, we have Spectre. This boss is actually a reference to the monkey villain from Ape Escape, and it's a pretty simple one, where it's just kind of a enemy gauntlet where he's spawning tons of enemies at you, and then he'll jump down and run around in a circle, and it's your job to capture him with the Ape Escape net. Like I said, there's not a lot going on with these first couple, and this one is definitely no exception. It's a pretty basic one, but it's an amazing reference for Ape Escape fans. Number 18, we have Mega Glooper. Mega Glooper is a pretty basic one as well that has you on this kind of railroad track rail system where you have to move to the left and to the right, and also tilt your controller in order to suck up all the junk on the beach, and also the gunk off of the gooper. The only difficulty is the spike balls that it's shooting at you, so you're just slowly moving from the left to the right, and there's not a lot going on with this one. Simply just sucking up the enemy all Luigi's Mansion style. Number 17 is the only boss on this list that I technically added. It's another gimmick control one, and it's weird because it's a boss that isn't named, so technically it isn't even considered a boss in this game's standards, which is weird since the Glooper and another boss on this list handles the very same way. But there's a giant dragon, all Dragon Driftway style, floating through the sky, and it's your job in order to fire ninja stars in order to bust its bulbs on its body. This is very Gobblegut from Mario Galaxy 2, but it's a very simplistic boss battle after all, where you're just chucking ninja stars at the weak point. Like I said prior, there is another controller-based boss, where this time you're shining light at ghosts all in a mansion. The Ecto Gang is just a gang of ghosts that appear through windows that pop open, and once again, Luigi's Mansion style, you're flashing light at these ghosts in order to defeat them as they pop out. It's really just an aim and point type of thing, and that's really about it. So there's not a whole lot going on here, but it still was pretty fun compared to the rest because it did remind me a lot of Luigi's Mansion, and it actually actively had you doing more than just sucking up trash or just shooting ninja stars at 4 weak points. Coming in at number 15, we have Frigid Frosty. Frigid Frosty is a giant snowman, and you'll pretty much have to take out each section one by one, starting with the top of the head. After you spin it down, you'll go through little sections where you have to continue running in one direction before his icy breath pushes you off the ledge and turns you into an icicle. This one is a very short and sweet one, but I like how it actually has you doing something in order to take it out. Going through the little sections and then jumping to the top of his head to spin was kind of satisfying, even though it was pretty basic and all. Plus, I like how he turns into a small, nice, friendly Frosty at the end. Number 14, we have Nidhogg, which is a God of War boss in this game, where you play as Kratos Bot. So as someone who never played God of War, I can't really tell you what this is referencing, but it's a pretty simple one nevertheless. It's your job to throw your axe at the 3 metal bandages on his rear end after he runs by, but it's incredibly easy to run out of the way. He moves very slow. But after 3 axe throws, you can then grab his cord out the back, and Mario Bowser style from Mario 64, you kind of just chuck him into the background at a giant piece of ice to finish the level. It's satisfying, but still nothing special. Coming in at number 13, we have Chief Kawa. This is the Uncharted themed level where you play as Nathan Drakebot, and you have a little gun pistol there. It's your job to climb up and down the rope as you're trying to exit the tomb with the treasure. You have to watch out for a massive laser that'll shoot at you, or you're a one-shot. This is one of the first bosses on the list that actually had some difficulty for me, where you have to keep firing at the skulls that would appear and sliding up and down the rope. This was something that was more of a spectacle to me, and it was just a really fun cinematic scene as you're getting chased by this ghoul coming out of the temple. And it just really referenced Uncharted with some of the creepy creatures it would have in the first two games. But you'll use your pistol at the very end in order to blast the crown off of the thing and defeating it in the process. This was a pretty cool themed boss overall. Number 12, we have Uber Foe, and this one reminded me a lot of Torque Drift from Super Mario Odyssey. In fact, a better version of that boss for sure. It also had a dash of Top Maniac to me from Super Mario Galaxy, but it's your job to use the rooster on your back in order to shoot up into the air all rocket nozzle style and blast the bottom of it when it flies over. This one was also pretty simple, but it was a fun and engaging fight, and I often missed a couple times if you don't calculate and lead your shots ahead of time, but overall I did have a good time with this one. Now we get into some of the bosses that had a lot more going for them. Number 11, we have Captain Shortfuse. This time Astro will be using his metal suit, which puts you into a small metal ball, which makes you impervious to damage, so you can just kind of sit in the ball and chill while fire goes right through you. It's your job to turn into a metal ball, jump into the little volcanoes spread across the stage, and blast into his head, which will have you moving from the left and to the right, back and forth, as each little volcano spawns. There will be tons of enemies in your way and things flying every which way, so you'll constantly have to be going into defensive mode or you'll get set ablaze very quickly. This is one of the first ones on this list I took a couple bits of damage to and actually died a couple times just because it gets kind of hectic for that third and final hit. But the one problem that I did come across with lots of these bosses is very similar to Mario games. Lots of them are 3 hits, which does make them a lot easier than they could have been. I wish some of them had a couple more phases like this one in particular, but it wasn't terrible at all. Coming in at number 10 for our top 10, we have Tama Trio, which are these 3 baby birds that are still not hatched from their eggs. It's your job to use your elephant bot in order to suck up sap, in order to create platforms to lead all the way to the top in order to hit the top bird each and every single time. This one was also a very satisfying one to shoot out the sap and bounce off of them, and of course sucking up the yolk from the egg and just completely destroying the bird. It's kind of gruesome, but also so daggone satisfying to actually do. The rumble of the controller also really helps with this one, and yeah, it just feels really good. I know it's wrong to say that about killing baby birds, but man, it's just executed so well. Plus at the end you get to run through a bunch of robotic apples and smack them around, and it has such an amazing tactical feel with the controller. I did this for literally like 10 minutes. Number 9, we have Captain Pincher, which is once again another giant skeleton robot, this time with a giant barrel for a peg leg. It's your job to use the monkey robot in order to pick up these different rocks and chuck them at the barrel in order to break it open. Then you'll scale the entire robot, all Shadow of the Colossus style, which I thought was pretty awesome, just to fight its head at the very top, where you'll take out some enemies and then knock his head off, which was also a very satisfying battle. I love climbing the robot, and just fighting this giant oversized enemy was super fun. Number 8, we have Genie of the Lamp, which is a giant robotic genie, and he will spawn skeleton skulls in order to fly towards you. You'll have your pet robo dog on your back in order to blast out of the way, but it's your job to blast the golden skull right back at it in order to knock it out. In between phases, he'll spawn enemies all over the stage for you to take out and destroy, but it definitely gets a lot harder when you fight him during his revenge boss fight in the same galaxy. Mostly because of a lot of more spawned enemies and also an ice rink battlefield making it pretty slippery, and he also has a lot more attacks that he'll shove at you, including a lot more skulls, but it's still the same fight where you're knocking back the gold skull, and I actually found this one to be fun. Using the dog for a final burst in order to knock him all the way back down into the lamp was a very satisfying conclusion as well. At number 7, we have the Blunderjaw, which is a reference to the Thunderjaw from Horizon, where you play as Aloy robot, and it's your job to shoot bomb arrows at the Blunderjaw's fuel cells that will pop up variously across its body. And it's also your job to take out the rockets that'll fire at you, but every time you fire an arrow, it will kind of take you into a slow-mo effect, very similar to the Horizon games. This was a lot of fun, and you don't need extreme accuracy. It kind of helps you out a little bit on the energy cells, but it still was a blast to see how cinematic it was with this giant T-Rex chasing you through this Red Sea. The final scene is really all Breath of the Wild style at the very end of the game, where you fly up in the air to shoot the final eye on Ganon's head. You do something very similar with the Blunderjaw as it blasts you up into the air. And then there's a final scene where he comes back, but he's in a very weakened state, and his final fuel cell is exposed, where you can then blow him up for the final time. It's a very cinematic boss fight that absolutely references the games perfectly. Now we get into our main chapter bosses, which were some pretty big highlights for this game. At number 6, we have Falcon McFly, which is a giant robotic falcon where you'll ride on his stomach and then on his back depending on the phase that you're in. So it's your job to take out all the enemies on its back and then roll into your metal ball once again in order to blast its beak away. This then allows you to walk on its 2 wings, which are kind of based on like a helicarrier or some type of jet. You have to spin around to unscrew the bolts and then slam onto his air panels, which will then flip him over when you can land on his back. You then have to make his way all the way to the helmet, where you'll bounce off the back end and then slam on the top of the helmet in order to break it apart, and you'll do this 3 times. My only complaint here is that there's no separate phase that changes this fight up, when lots of the other bosses in this game does have different phases, where you'll just be doing this another 2 times, where the attacks will come out a lot faster with more enemies, but it's definitely not that difficult at all, and you can really blast through this once you find its weak points. After knocking off the helmet, you can then punch a giant welt that grows on his head, and I thought it was really going to enter a different section where you'd be falling down towards it, battling it still, but nope, he just falls down into its nest and the battle is over. I really wish there was just one more phase. This boss could have been a lot higher on this list. We are now down to the final 5, and at number 5 we have the chapter 3 final boss being Lady Venara. This will have you battling a giant robotic snake, and it's not much to it. A lot of the time you're just using your robotic rooster in order to fly up onto the platform so you can dodge the poison that fills the stage. You'll also be moving to the left and to the right in order to dodge the tail, and also using the rooster to fly over that as well. The main point here is to knock out its blue energy sails on the tail in order for its head to fly above the screen, allowing you to use the rooster to blast the gem that rests on the snake's chin. But thankfully after the second time, there will be a separate phase, taking you all the way outside of the temple, where then you will actually run on the snake's body itself as it's slithering down the hill at super fast speeds. You'll need to use your rooster to jump over the eggs, which is a very cinematic scene, and I really love the end of this, making your way all the way to the head of the snake in order to use the rooster one last time, knocking it out for good. Number 4, you have a battle against Mecha Leon, which is a giant metal lizard. This boss instantly reminded me of Blinky's giant metal frog from Pac-Man World 2, where his tongue would stick out and you had to jump on the tongue in order to rev roll into his uvula. Yeah, his name was Blinky in this game, not Clyde, which was very strange. I don't know, they mixed up the naming here. But you'll have to use your little timer buddy in order to freeze time right when his tongue sticks out in order to run all the way up it and smack the uvula, which is so satisfying. I love this. There's also a lot of other reasons that you'll need to use the timer in order to slow down time. For instance, he will fire giant blades at you, so you'll need to freeze time in order to run on top of them. He'll also fire homing rockets, which means you need to freeze time in order to move out the way for them to detonate on the floor elsewhere. And he also has some absolutely insane fire attacks that you'll need to freeze time in order to just get through them. And finally, at the end, you'll pull his nose ring all Gooper Blooper style and fling it back in order to fling him off the tree for good. Number 3, we have the first main boss of the game being Mighty Chewy, which is a giant robotic ape. In all King Kong style, you have to go from building to building using your robotic dog to fly through the air and make your way to the platform that he's on. With the actual fight, he'll actually bring giant signs and pieces of buildings toward you with windows in them. It's your job to dash through the windows with the dog's power up, and then you'll have to dodge shockwaves with his bell, which you'll then bang in order to bounce off of his head a couple of times, which then requires you to beat up his individual eyeballs. Like I said, there's a lot going on with this very first boss. I actually thought blasting through the glass panels was super satisfying, especially when you had to jump off of other pieces of the sign as well. It was just really well made. Then after both of his eyeballs are shot, he'll get angry and rip the stage in half, which requires you to jump to the other side. And now it's your turn to take out his teeth. Yes, he'll try to bite the stage, causing shockwaves to appear, and it's your job to blast through all of his metal teeth, which will take 2 individual phases of its own. So it's not a 3-hit boss. If anything, it's a 4-hit with multiple different phases. I truly enjoyed the heck out of this first boss of the game. This set a really great standard for what else was to come with the rest of the bosses. Such an amazing boss battle. Coming in at number 2, we have Wako Tako. For this boss, you'll be using your frog hands to fight a giant robotic octopus, and it's your job to knock all the individual gloves off of his tentacles. And this can be actually very difficult for just the second boss or second main boss in this game. His fists kind of come at you very quickly, so you really have to pay attention to the sand movement, and it's very easy to take damage here. It's your job to punch the glove off of each tentacle when it comes up with your frog fist. After 2 gloves come off, you can connect to the tentacles in order to fling yourself at his mask, and then punch one side of the mask off. I knew this was a good boss because there were so many little pieces of mechanics in order for you to take out this boss. It wasn't just jump on his head 3 times, you had to do a various amount of things, and I really enjoyed that. I mean, each glove that you take off had to be done in a completely different way, including one where you actually had to get his glove stuck in its own ink, which is just extremely clever and unique. But it's the final phase that actually had my jaw drop. He'll go all the way into the background and actually part the sea all Moses style, which will actually have you traversing underneath the sea onto the platforms in order to reach him. It is such a cinematic scene. I absolutely loved every part of this. It very much reminded me of Donkey Kong Country for some reason, and I just wanted to keep playing on this level. I didn't want it to end, man. And long and behold, there's still a lot more to this boss. Yes, you have to take out each of the individual eyes as well before you're even done. Then you have to grab both of his eyelids, or its tears, it looks like you're grabbing, in order to fling it away. I'm like, this boss was so good. And coming in at number 1 is the final boss in the game, Space Bully Nebulax. Now, it's not an incredibly unique themed boss, it's just a green alien sticking his head out of a UFO, but what I'm actually going to do is kind of cheat here, and I'm going to count the whole final section, even the Star Fox flying section. I just think it's extremely cinematic. I love all the bots coming out on their own little playstations and their different platforms and flying them like ships in order to battle, and I just love it. It's very cinematic. It feels like a little war going on, and this is all before the actual boss fight even begins. I mean, shoot, you'll even take out like an Emperor starship from Star Wars. There's just so much going on with this final area. But I will be honest, I can see how some people might put some of the other bosses above this one because overall, I was expecting a couple of more phases. But the reason why I put it at number 1 is simply due to the fact that it brings all the game's mechanics together. And this is something that I absolutely love when games do, where they actually utilize everything that the game was known for. It brings back all your little robotic animal buddies, but my only problem with this is you'll only get to use 3 of them, which means when you spin the wheel, you'll only get to use 3 of the 5 different attacks, which is kind of annoying considering the fact that the other ones are really good as well. Literally all of them are really well done. So if you want to experience this boss battle to the fullest, you have to play over and over again to see each section. But the one with the monkey hands is super cool. He's firing bullets at you and you have to pick them up off the ground in order to fire them back at him. For the octopus, he'll shoot these bubble barriers at you and you'll have to inflate to go above them and deflate to go underneath them back and forth, until eventually you can blow up a robotic squid with air in order to blast it at Nebulax. There's then one where he's firing tons of metal shards at you and you have to pick them all off the floor with a giant magnet, which means you need to collect a certain amount of pieces before you can even throw the ball at him. One of my favorite ones is the robotic dog, where he'll pull out a giant laser sword that's kind of made out of glass or crystal, and it's your job to use the dog to blast back and forth out of the way, and then finally to completely shatter the sword. But then he'll try to stab you with it, which means you definitely have to try to blast out of the way at the last second, and then you'll need to break it apart once again. After you do that, he'll actually throw the hilt at the sword at you, which then you can bounce right back into his face, which is an awesome phase. And then when you get the frog hands, it's your job in order to completely smash his mallet. He'll start smashing the PS5 ship, and you can even see the dents that he leaves inside of it, which is pretty cool. But you'll need to use your frog hands in order to break each side of the hammer until eventually you can spin it around, once again, all Mario 64 style, and fling it into him. At the end of each phase, you'll need to go up to the ship in order to release his fingers by punching them and then punching the locks off of the middle of the platform. There's then one last part where you'll use some type of PlayStation Hyper Beam in order to completely blast it out of the sky and reflect all the items and things that he's tossing at you from the course of the game. I really do love this boss and it's a great ending to the game. I just wish they made it mandatory where you had to use each of the robotic animal buddies. That would have been a lot better, stretching out the boss a lot longer as well. But this ending was also satisfying, and overall, the bosses in Astro Bot were a blast. But that is my ranking of all the bosses from Astro Bot, from worst to best. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this ranking, and if you agree or if you disagree, definitely let me know why. But thank you guys so much for tuning in, and like always, I'll see you all on the next one. See ya, guys.